space is the ultimate who the fuck knows, because we can only see so far. We see so far, but even so far is only so far.
Well, and then they're saying like it's always expanding, which that can't be true, because like what is it expanding into? If space is space, you know, if they're like, oh, it's like blowing up a balloon where everything's okay, but you're blowing up a balloon in a room, right? So what's the room that you're blowing the balloon into? And then that's in a bigger room, and then that's in this.
And then there's the concept that it's actually finite. It's not infinite, and it's some sort of donut shape. It like goes back around eventually.
But then who made all that?
Right.
Like, is there a God? Did God make this?
Or is God the universe?
Yeah, but then who made God? And then that bothers me.
Right. But
like, who made that thing?
Is that a thing that we think that, like, because we were born and we die, that we have these biological limitations that we attach to the universe itself?
That's fair. That we see things as being built and destroyed.
That there's always been something. Well, wouldn't it be crazier if there wasn't something at one point in time? That seems even crazier. Then there always has been something. Because if it's just something, if it's just the nature of everything, there is always something, right? Right. It couldn't be nothing and then all of a sudden everything. That seems...
Because what started that? What kicked that off?
Exactly.
What snapped its fingers? Like
That's McKenna's great line. Terrence McKenna had a great line about the difference between science and religion is that science only asks you for one miracle. I want you to believe in one miracle, the Big Bang.
Yeah. That's a good one.
It's a great line. Yeah. It's because it really is true. Yes. And it's funny because people would be incredulous about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, but yet they're convinced that the entire universe was smaller than the head of a pin, and for no reason than anybody's adequately explained to me. It makes sense.
Yeah, no.
Instantaneously became everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't buy that.
I'm sticking with Jesus on that one. Like, Jesus makes more sense.
What I was trying to get Billy in that conversation that I had with him to get to the bottom of partly was a question of methodology. Like, I think he got frustrated at me at one point because I kept asking, you know, what are the criteria that you're using when you're looking at one source versus another source and coming up with a conclusion? Because in historiography, it's the inference to the best explanation. And so there are different ways that you go about that, different methodologies. And historians very rarely disagree on the data and the evidence. It's the conclusions that you draw from that. Right. But then there are some things that are just out and out false. And I don't think Billy totally knew what I was talking about, but it's those criteria that we look at when we look at something that does come from like an oral tradition and eventually gets written down and becomes a literary text. And then you analyze that on the basis of it being a literary text.
There are older versions.
The Dead Sea Scrolls are the oldest of the Old Testament. So when they were discovered, so they were discovered in 1946 to 1957. And at that point, during their discovery, they pushed back a lot of our previous oldest manuscripts 1,000 years, which was a big deal.
How old are they?
They're anywhere between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century BC. And it's a number of different languages. So the vast majority of it is in Hebrew, but there's also a lot in Aramaic and then Greek and in Nabatean. So it's like an umbrella term to just describe a whole bunch of literature. And you know, when we're talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls, like you have ones like the Great Isaiah Scroll, which is fully complete. Like it's a copy of the book of Isaiah, and it's a full, complete scroll. But then other ones are so fragmentary that we think they're written in Hebrew, but we can't actually tell. So that one is fascinating. So this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but when we discovered the Great Isaiah Scroll, previous to that, the earliest copy of Isaiah that we had was in the Masoretic text, which is in the Middle Ages.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was literally 1,000 years. We literally pushed back our understanding of Isaiah 1,000 years. And the thing that really shocked scholars, like I said, this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but one of the things that shocked them about Isaiah was that it was word for word identical to the Masoretic text.
Word for word?
Word for word.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we get that in history too, whereas we have these kind of what we think are established conventions, and then all of a sudden we discover something and it like completely overthrows the ideas that we have.
Like Clovis first.
Yeah, or go back to Tepe.
Yeah.
Or actually, good segue.
That's the best one, right?
So I made one. I made something for you.
Ooh.
So I make papyri facsimiles. Oh, my description is a little bit wonky here. Fix that. So you were talking about like what is our oldest manuscript evidence? So this guy is P52, John Ryland's 457. So that's a genuine Egyptian papyri that I made. I cut it out for you, and then I transcribed the text on that manuscript. So when we're talking about what is potentially our oldest evidence for the New Testament, this manuscript that most likely comes from Oxyrhynchus, Egypt, is the one that usually is universally accepted as our oldest one. And that contains John 18, where Jesus is on trial before Pilate. And yeah, so that's the one. It's in the John Rylands Library in Manchester, England.
So this is a copy of that exactly? This is exactly what it looks like?
Yeah, so I cut that out on the papyri with a scalpel, and then I transcribed the text on.
You did a great job, dude.
And
this is, you nerded out.
I know. I'm
for real nerded out. This is a real nerding out of.
So that's actually, yeah, so that's someone else's facsimile, which is not as good as the one I made.
It's not as good. Yours is better.
And where Jesus is on trial before Pilate, and Jesus says, everyone who follows the truth, who is following the truth, follows me. And on the back has the words of Pilate saying, what is truth? But so part of my research, so the reason I bring this up is because before this was discovered by C.H. Roberts in the 1940s, the convention was, because of a guy named C.H. Bauer, that the Gospel of John was 2nd century. And so he had this, he was a student of Hegel. Have you ever heard of Hegelian dialectic? So you have like a thesis, synthesis, and antithesis.
Yes.
So Hegel had this philosophical theory, and his student Bauer takes that and he incorporates this into history. And he says, the earliest gospel, Mark, has this very Jewish Jesus, and then the later gospels have a very the last of what are called the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Luke has a very kind of more divine Jesus. And so he says, based on this, John is the last written one. And it combines these two where you get a very human and a very divine Jesus together. And so based on this, he says that John has to be 2nd century. Well, we discover this guy. C.H. Roberts is, literally going through these piles of manuscripts in these drawers that are being like stashed away. And he finds this guy and he sees that it's written on both sides, which is almost exclusively a Christian convention. Because in the ancient world, they used scrolls. And the Christians, for reasons we're not entirely clear on, they start to make codices, books. And so they write on both sides. And so he says, okay, this is written on both sides. It's probably a Christian manuscript. So he sends it off to the leading paleographers, or guys who date manuscripts. And they all say, this is the beginning of the 2nd century. And so there's still debate about the dating of this, but the unanimous consensus is that it's comfortably 2nd century, potentially the beginning of the 2nd century, which means that this is found in Egypt. John is probably writing his gospel in Ephesus, so it has to be written by John, spread around, find its way to Egypt, be copied, and then end up in this manuscript. Wow. Which means that at minimum, you've already pushed the Gospel of John back into the 1st century comfortably, and potentially even, most likely into the lifetime of the eyewitnesses of these events. And so all of the literature up until that point from the scholarly consensus about the dating of the Gospel of John gets totally rewritten.
Wow.
And it's because of that guy. And because of my academic work, where I was telling you, in paratextual features, when we look at these tiny manuscripts and you figure out, okay, well, what does that look like on the page? I also made you... So I used 2 different variations of papyri.
Whoa.
So you have there where P52 would have been on the page, and based on it's called codicological conventions, the spacings of the words, and the way that the size of the margin that we can see, where it would have been on the page and how big the page would have actually been. So this is like a reconstruction, and then I filled in the rest of the text in the same sort of stylistic hand of the scribes at that time, what that page would have looked like. So this would have come from what would have been essentially a pocket copy of the Gospel of John.
I was very interested by this because I've looked at every conspiracy theory, moon landing, 9/11, JFK, I mean, all kinds of conspiracies. But the one I had never looked at, and now, I'm 58, so I'm like, okay, let me look at this one, is God. And I said, let me see about this God thing. I've never been a religious guy. And so I start reading, and I start talking to people. I also found that around me, like a couple of people I was working with, they were all Christians. And not that anyone was ever pushing anything on me. When I asked them questions, they were gladly answered. And there's a lot of stuff written about Jesus. There's a lot written, thousands of years of books. And there's some contemporary stuff such as Evidence Demands a Verdict. And, this just is so much. And I got to tell you, Joe, as sure as I know that Building 7 didn't fall down out of sympathy for Building 1 and 2, God is real, Jesus existed, he was a badass outlaw, and it has changed my outlook on life. It has really changed the way I look at things. And I believe that we can win with God. I know that may sound a little weird coming from me, but I'm all in on this. And, I'm not you may think of someone who believes in God or Jesus as a crazy right-wing nut job, which I'm obviously not. But man, it's powerful stuff when you put prayer into your life. It's really powerful. The Holy Spirit.
I don't think there's anything weird about it at all. I mean, I think there's a reason why it exists, why it's so prevalent in so many cultures. It helps people.
It's about love.
Yeah,
it's all about love.
Yeah. What do you think Jesus' role was? Who do you think he was?
Well, he was literally the Son of God, and he was on the earth to teach, and he wandered. I mean, he was an outlaw. He did some crazy shit. He overturned the tax tables, and he really railed against a lot of stuff.
Why do you think, based on what information that you have, why do you think that he existed?
Jesus had to die after teaching us how to live a good life and how to be a good person, which is all about love. And that was to absolve us of our sins, which is kind of a cool out. So everyone's a sinner, everyone's fucked up, everyone's flawed, but you are forgiven for that as long as you try to be better. I mean, that's literally every book in the Bible is about. Like I was reading this morning, I forget what it was, but it's like Jesus said, be quick to listen, slow to answer, and slow to get angry. And I took that here, because I remember last time I was here, which was over a year ago, and a lot of people said, dude, you're a fucking asshole. You keep interrupting Joe. And I did. And you even said, oh, calm down, Adam, calm down. You're excited to talk.
But that's just normal excitedness. You're not being an asshole.
But it's better if I listen. It makes everything better. So it's just small things like that. But ultimately, it's 100% about love and knowing that it can be beaten. This evil in the world can be fought against. In fact, it's probably already done. And I'm just new to this, Joe, so I can't answer everything. But I love studying it. I love reading. It's fascinating material. And there's so much there. It's really fascinating.
A person being the actual Son of God, I would need a lot of evidence to believe that.
Evidence Demands a Verdict would be a great book to read. But just as I know that JFK was assassinated, and I really believe the CIA was involved because it's been written. I've just read documents and documents. So when you look into the Bible and everything that's been written about the Bible, that's 100 million times more has been written about that, and it's survived all these years. So I'm just someone who reads.
Writes about The Shining, and a bunch of people review the writing of The Shining and write about The Shining, it doesn't mean that The Shining actually happened. Just because so many people are writing about this particular religion doesn't mean that there was a person.
But they haven't written about.
Doesn't mean they weren't. I'm not saying they were. I'm not saying I know. But I'm saying it doesn't mean that man was the Son of God.
I'm just telling you, my process is when I investigate things, and to me it was a conspiracy theory. Like, I'm just going to start reading, and I read for 3 weeks until I gave up and said, I can keep reading, but all the evidence just is thrown at me over and over and over again. If I'm going to believe certain things about JFK or 9/11 or whatever, which I've read as much as I can, but there's not that much. It's just for my own conscience. I have to, if I'm going to believe that after reading 50 years of documentation versus that thousands of years of documentation.
But it's thousands of years of documentation of a story. It's interesting that some people would rather not get there and rather be in a shitty, depressed state as long as they're not duped. But you've been duped by life. Like,
of course.
Because your life sucks.
But,
I know a lot of atheists that are super depressed.
The idea is not that God fixes everything. The idea is if you can believe in it and can put yourself in a mindset, I'm just looking at a little abstract now.
Yes.
You put yourself in a mindset that things can happen, that miracles do happen, that things do impact your life, and that you look at things in a different way. You're not always completely fucked up about this is not happening for me or that's not happening. Do
you think it's like psychological software that you can run? Like your belief in God. Do you think that's like psychological software that you could just run and they're like, ooh, look, everything's smoother?
No, it's not. No, because everything isn't smoother, but you at least don't freak out when shit isn't smooth.
Right. I don't mean it in a derogatory way
or
a negative way.
I know.
What I mean is like, is that why it's effective? That it's like a natural thing that you could run and it's been honed over time. It only makes sense that it has
yes.
been,
Well, here
right?
you go. I love this.
So it just sort of slides.
What is the software?
into...
What is the code? It's the Bible. It is the gospel, Scripture. That is, if you want to look at it that way, it is the code that you run in your brain, and it does things for you.
Yeah.
So that's a way of looking at it. And that's a kind of a good way, actually. I hadn't thought of that one. I like that.
Yeah, like a psychological software.
Sure.
But the problem is, if he was really good at it and really successful in a time when people were not very sophisticated, he could probably pull that off. And then when he dies, everybody would say he was the Son of God.
Sure.
And we don't know.
No.
So how would you know that this guy who lived 2,000 plus years ago
is
actually the Son of God?
That's why I call myself a believer.
Because you just believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've seen what it has done for my own life.
What does it do for your own life when you believe?
It makes me a very happy person. Prayer does work, not if you're asking for stuff for yourself, but I've experienced, it's not really just the miracles that I've experienced, but it makes me happy. Good things have been happening.
So you just find it effective. It works for you.
Yeah, of course.
And so you're just saying this has helped your life. How can you possibly prove...
You can never get to the end, of course not.
Right. But you can never prove. You could prove that people believed it. Yeah, but how could you prove that someone was actually the Son of God?
No.
Or are we all?
Of course, we're all God.
Of course he was.
We're 100% God.
So if he was
one
of us,
he was the teacher,
then he was the Son of God, because we're all children of God.
I'm with that. I'm with that, yeah.
Maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's a puzzle. Jesus.
That's right. Help me, Jesus. Help me, Jesus.
Help me, Jesus.
If you enjoyed today's episode on JRE Plus, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you.